For more than 2 decades, we've been educating our listeners about financial topics that are most important to you. Do you have enough money to retire? How will you keep from running out of money? What's your plan for managing market risk? What about taxes, inflation, and healthcare? Each week, we talk with an advisor at Lucia Capital Group about these issues and more. This is Managing Your Financial Future. All right, Managing Your Financial Future. Thank you so much. Welcome back. Oh, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited. Anytime we have a podcast, I'm always happy to be here, especially when I have my buddy here, Professor Rick Plum. Say hello.
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 I mean, I look at it as it sure beats working. I mean,
It sure does. I mean, as we're here in our spacious studios here in the at the headquarters at Lucia Capital Group, I see everybody working and they're calling, and going through graphs and numbers and charts and all this stuff, and we're sitting here just yucking it up
because that's what we do and we enjoy it.
That's what we do. We do enjoy it. I have fun. I've been doing this radio thing now I'm coming up on my 40th year.
You got me beat. I'm only in the 30s.
Yeah, in radio, but you got me beat in, working in financial planning by a long shot. Since I don't officially actually work as a planner, I'm the podcast host.
Yeah, and I'm the financial planner.
You're the financial planner.
Certified financial planner.
You are professional.
Okay.
Certified financial planner professional. Got to say that. CFP. Okay. With a little
CFPP?
R. Yeah, with a little R circle around it.
Okay.
This topic here today, it lends itself to strategy. And this is what we like to talk about. We're going to give you some rules here. Professor Plum is going to give you some rules here. Things you need to know about required minimum distributions. Now, required minimum distributions certainly do affect people who are old enough to take them, right?
Right.
But they also affect people who are a lot younger than that, whether you know it or not.
If you are, I don't want to say lucky enough because that entails somebody dying, but if you are the recipient of an inherited, or if you are inheriting a retirement plan, whether it be a retirement plan from somebody's work or an IRA, whether it be Roth or traditional.
You're right. Exactly.
You've got some issues you have to deal with.
You do. And so we're going to go over those. We're going to cover the changes that have happened. This is a really wacky year.
Yeah, for a long time, we had a very simplistic way of doing required minimum distributions. Almost everybody was treated the same, very few outliers. And then in the Secure Act in 2020 kind of took it and stuck it on its head.
Well,
it changed things.
It did. We for years, it was just age 70 and a half. Why
Right.
the half? I don't know. But 70 and a half.
And then, the beneficiary, they could stretch it over their lifetime.
If you inherited, say, an IRA and you were 40 years old, you could stretch it out over whatever
life
your
expectancy of a 41-year-old.
Yeah, and there's a table for that. So it was
thanks to the IRS. The IRS gives you a table of how long
you're expecting
a certain
to live.
age will live.
Right.
Nice of them to know that.
Well, it made things easier. It also made things better for somebody who is, maybe 40 years old and inherited an IRA that was rather substantial. Right. You weren't required to add that much to your income. So we're going to talk about this. Let's get into this now. We know what it was before, 70 and a half. And then the Secure Act changed this a couple of years back, right?
Yes, it did. It changed it to age 72. And I guess that wasn't good enough because Secure Act 2.0 came out and said, let's make it 73. Oh, and in Secure Act 2.0, it said, and also for people that were born a little bit later on, we're going to make it 75. Now, it got confusing really quickly. So the easiest way I found to look at it is just what year were you born?
There you go.
If you were born in and the way it looks today, forget all the changes up to this point. What is it today?
Yeah.
If you're born in 1951 or later, your required minimum distribution starting age is 73.
Well, later up to a point.
If you're born in 1960 or later, your required minimum distribution starting age is 75. So the people that are worried about this right now are the people that were born in 50, 51, 52, 49, somewhere in there. It's like, okay, where am I at? What is my age 50? If you were born in 51, this year you don't have to worry about it. Next year you have a required minimum distribution. If you're born in 1950
or earlier,
you have a required minimum distribution this year. That's it. Now that seems pretty simplistic, but the whole idea of the required minimum distribution is it needs to be part of the overall strategy, because what is the purpose of the required minimum distribution? It's to create a taxable distribution from your IRA or your 401k, retirement account, whatever it is. A taxable distribution. How many of us love that idea of taxable? And we don't. And so for some people, it catches them by surprise. And they're like, oh man, that not only did I have to pay taxes on that, it's messing up my Social Security taxability, or it puts me over the IRMA limits, income related monthly adjustment amount for Medicare. And it's got all these little negative issues that come along with it. And so how do we plan for the RMDs?
Exactly. That's the real question here. And we're going to talk for this part about just the RMD owners. We're going to get into inherited IRAs or 401ks, retirement plans here in just a little bit. But start, yes, with the IRA owners. Now, much of the advice that's out there, Professor Plum, which you've seen, has directed people to save that tax bill for later.
Right. Most of the stuff I've seen as far as when to take money out of your IRAs, don't do it until the IRS forces you to take the money out at RMD age, now age 73. So you live off of your personal money, live off of the built up cash that you have. Try to keep your taxes as low as possible until the government mandates that you take the money out of your IRA at age 73. That is not always, and in fact, rarely the best course of action, because what that does is it allows the IRA to grow. The government would love this they'll love you to do this, by the way. That means the IRA is going to grow for those number of years that you're not taking money out of it after you've retired. And that means that the required minimum distribution will be bigger. And when the required minimum distribution is bigger, it may put you in a different tax bracket. It may subject more of your Social Security taxation. Mm-hmm. Nothing good is going to come of that. And there are ways to take advantage of it. So if you want to live up to what the journalists say and don't spend any money from your IRA until you get to a required minimum distribution age, fine. Do it that way. But don't waste good. Do Roth conversions in the meantime and get money out of the IRA before the RMDs hit, but control your tax bracket. Manage your tax bracket.
Well, in other words, take money out of that IRA.
Pay the taxes on it when it's beneficial to pay it, which may be earlier rather than later.
Well, so he's talking about, do you have to be retired, I guess? Is it better if you're retired to do it? Well, you're going to check your current tax bracket.
You're
right?
always looking at, is now a good time? And you're always looking at what the future might hold. Most of the people that are working, they're probably in an equal or greater tax bracket while they're working than they will be in retirement. We hear about how so many people don't have enough money in retirement. Well, that means they're making more money when they're working. But if you're in a position where your future retirement with Social Security and everything that kicks in is going to be equal to or greater from a tax standpoint than it is today, mm-hmm. Doing conversions today while you're working is not a problem, but it's just a matter of what is it going to cost me today? What is my benefit in the future? If it's going to cost me more today than the benefit in the future, no, I don't want to do it. If it's going to cost me less today than it's going to, than in the future, now's a good time to consider Roth conversions before the required minimum distributions start. And why do I say that? Because you cannot convert an amount equal to the required minimum distribution. Yes, they're both taxable. An RMD comes out and goes into your bank account, that's taxable. You take money out of a traditional IRA and move it to a Roth IRA, that's taxable. What does it matter? The IRS, what does it matter to the IRS? It's taxable either way. It matters because they wrote the law and said you cannot do a conversion with an amount equal to the required minimum distribution.
Okay, so if you have an $8,000 required minimum distribution for that year, you have to take that required minimum distribution first on its own separately. Uh-huh. Now, after that, if you want, you can convert the same amount
or any amount you want,
or any amount you want after.
Right.
It doesn't matter, but you have to do you're saying you have to do the required minimum distribution first.
You have to take at least the RMD out. You cannot convert that amount that's attributable to the RMD. That's what the rules say.
Yeah, and people get tripped up on this, and it can be complicated. Now, when you talk about doing Roth conversions, you're not talking about necessarily doing that. I mean, how much time prior to turning RMD age should you be looking at this stuff? I mean, it's got to be a while.
Well, I think you should be looking at it every year, regardless of your age.
You mean like even in your 50s?
Yeah, even a young guy like you. I mean, you're not 60 yet, are you?
No, I got a couple months to go yet, buddy. I keep telling my wife, who just turned 60 here about a week ago.
And you don't turn until next year.
Next year, man. Next year. That's a whole year. That's next year. Come on, man.
You're so much younger than your wife.
No,
but,
sure. 9 weeks. Yeah. Anyway.
But no, you look at it now, and the thing that makes it difficult is that we have the potential for a different tax code in 3 years. We have the potential for the current tax code where we have a 12, 22, 24, and then 32% bracket to go to a 15, 28% bracket in 2026.
Well, and this is because the current laws sunset.
The Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, which created the new tax brackets in 2018, sunset.
Supposed to all go away, right? We would go back to
where we were prior
unless
to
something
the enactment, unless Congress can get something together, and they haven't shown that they can.
They can't
do
even
anything together.
They can't even get. Well, they've just barely got.
Yeah, they got the new
speaker.
But,
yeah, good luck governing.
Yeah.
All right. So, but let's just say that's something that will be addressed.
And so we kind of expect rates to be a little higher in the future. Yeah. So now, even if you're working, depending upon where you are on your income scale compared to what you might or might not be when you retire, I mean, for somebody who has an $8,000 RMD, to me that's about a $200,000 IRA. I'm not that worried about it, but for somebody who has $1.5 million, $2 million IRA, yeah, they need to be looking at it.
Yeah, because that's, what is it? First year is about still 4%.
A little under 4%. So,
so $2 million,
$80,000.
$80,000.
Or $76,000.
It's a lot of money to add to your taxable column.
Right. And so those are the kinds of things that need to be addressed before you are forced into doing something that you don't have any control over.
What's the ideal person? Maybe somebody who retires at age. Well, what's the ideal
one that makes
scenario?
me the beneficiary?
No.
Oh no, I can't do that.
No, we're not. That's not what we're saying. But somebody who say retires at age 64 and they've got personal money. Let's say they've got IRAs and 401ks, and they've got maybe some Roth money.
Yeah.
Is that somebody who should be looking at living off of the personal and maybe the Roth money combination, while at the same time taking those IRAs and just taking some of that money out while they're in? I mean, how much room do they have in what's called the 0% tax bracket?
Well, most people don't have a lot left because they're making more than $20,000, $30,000.
Well, if they're retired, but it depends on what they're living off of, too.
Right. And it all depends on how much their Social Security is, whether they're taking it now, where they're getting their income from. So there's a lot of factors. When you say who is the ideal, there is no ideal person. There is no one size fits all. Everybody has their own situation. You could have somebody that has a bunch of personal money in a very small IRA. They don't need to do any conversions because their RMD is very moderate. On the other hand, you may have somebody that has a very large IRA with very little other money, and so they may want to consider, using up. Maybe they only need $60,000 a year. They may want to go all the way to 120 with Roth conversions so that they can, buy that and then defer taking their Social Security. There's all kinds of moving parts to this.
But if you're somebody who's just retired at age 60 some odd and they have a decent sized, call it a Roth, that they can live off of, for the next few years. I mean, you could live off of that and have basically no income showing on your.
That's a different game though, because I think from a strategic standpoint, if I have, money in a Roth and money in a traditional IRA, am I going to set my Roth up to create cash flow, meaning invest it very conservatively, and convert my traditional IRA, or just, live off my traditional IRA and let the Roth grow?
Well, that's true.
I would do it that way more than otherwise because it's a lot easier.
Well, it's true. And then depending on how much you need, certainly for a married person, what is it? The first 26,000?
27. Well, this year, 27, almost 28,000. A married couple can get a little over 30,000 if they're both 65 and pay no.
Yeah, well, it becomes more ideal. And that kind of what I was saying, if you're over 65,
this gets really complicated really quick.
It really does. It really does.
The idea is working with somebody who knows how to calculate these different issues and understands the interrelationship between the distribution for living, the distribution for RMD, the conversion, cost to convert, the tax on Social Security and other things, and make projections and look at the future and say, what is it today? What can we do today? And a lot of times when you talk to somebody about tax management, it's all about how do I reduce my taxes to the bare bones minimum today? And that isn't always the best issue, because sometimes you can reduce it today and it saves you X amount of dollars, but it creates a ticking time bomb for the future that creates a much, much higher tax for many years rather than just saving it in 1 year.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody the other day about incorporating the RMDs and doing things while there's a joint lifetime, where there's a joint tax return, because once there's a survivor, then it goes down to a single tax return and the taxes are worse.
Well, the taxes are worse because your bracket's cut.
Pretty much in half.
In half.
So you pay more in taxes, you lose some Social Security, you have higher expenses and lower income. That's so fun.
And as you said, this can get complicated.
Very.
So the good suggestion is to have somebody help you out to do this.
Right. Just understand that you should be incorporating those RMDs, even though you're not there yet. You should be looking towards them and saying, how do I make it less painful to deal with these required minimum distributions when I do get out to that age?
Yeah, and don't have to be 70. These, as you said, you should be looking at this stuff maybe in your 50s.
Yeah,
and certainly as you get closer to 60, this is stuff you should be planning for. And this is the kind of stuff that you do all the time, right? For people,
we're always
as an advisor,
we're always looking for some kind of an advantage that we can take. Thanks to the tax code.
Don't you feel good when you find something and you go, zing, I'm going to stick it to the man. Look what we can do here. This is good stuff.
I like when I can take control over something I really don't like.
Yeah, people think they don't have control over their tax bill, but really, frankly, they do.
Sometimes they do.
In many ways, they do. Now, speaking of controlling things, I want to take just a moment here to let you folks know about, longtime listeners of this podcast are well aware of the fact that whether your retirement is, 5 years away or 25 years away or whatever it is, that proper planning is the key. Your retirement income faces more than a few risks, both before and after retirement. Risks like compounding inflation, longevity risk, sequence of returns risk, market volatility, and that's just to name a few. I want to remind you that the professionals at Lucia Capital Group have spent decades devising a strategy that's designed to mitigate those risks. And you know it as our bucket strategy. And of course, each one is designed around your unique financial situation, your goals, and your risk tolerance. Don't forget, the consequences of the decisions you make today can be far-reaching, just like we've been saying for RMDs, right? Let the advisors and the investment professionals at Lucia Capital Group guide you to help you get there. It's all about your future, okay? So reminder, go to luciacap.com, or you can give them a call at 800-644-1150. That's luciacap.com, luciacap.com, or call 800-644-1150 and do it today. All right, back to the topic of RMDs. So
required minimum distribution for the owner, and they should be incorporated into how you set up the distribution from your assets. Should I be taking money from my IRA? Should I be taking it from my personal account? When I retire, how do I set it up? How do I locate my assets? My asset location is, I want $50,000 of income from my portfolio over and above my Social Security. Maybe I have some pension and some other things. Where should that 50 come from? Should it be coming from my personal money? Should it be coming from my IRA, my Roth IRA? If I'm taking it this way, should I be doing conversions at the same time and maybe maxing out the certain bracket that I'm in, knowing that if I don't do it, I'll be in a higher bracket later on? These are all the things that we look at when we're creating strategic plans for individuals to take advantage of not only the appropriate investments at the right time, but the appropriate tax treatment at the right time.
Yeah, because there are consequences for doing each one of those, taking money out of one or not taking money out of one.
And you have to consider it, because if you don't, 73 comes around and it might bite you.
And you've seen that scenario too, where somebody comes and says, "What can I do now? I'm 75, and I've got these taxes."
I've got this $90,000 required minimum distribution,
and I don't need the money, but I have to take it. And so that's for owners. Owners are generally these are maybe a little bit older people, but let's back it up and now talk about
somebody who inherits
an IRA. We've done a couple of podcast episodes on this, but this is really important stuff.
Now, the Secure Act changed the required beginning date for the owner, and that was moderately confusing. Which one do I have?
Just
which age do I have?
Match your birth year up to the age, and you're probably okay.
But they really confused and messed up or changed the rules for the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
If you are the beneficiary of a retirement account or an IRA, what do you have to do? And it just became troublesome. Even a lot of financial advisors, I get calls, through the day from outside advisors saying, "Okay, walk me through this again."
They're calling Professor Plum from across the street.
Yeah, well, it happens, but every once in a while. Yeah. But it is confusing. It is because,
of course, it is.
And not only have they changed the rules, but they said, okay, they changed their interpretation of the rule. They didn't change the rule changed in 2020, and then in 2020, late 2021, early 2022, they changed their interpretation of the rule. They didn't change the rule. They just said, we're looking at it differently now. So we're going to change the way it's implemented. But because we know it's confusing, so we're going to waive any penalties on this category of people. And then they get to 2023 and they say, we're still having troubles with people and companies updating their programs and everything for it. So we're going to waive the penalties again, but not on everybody, only on the people in this particular category.
There are like 5 categories of people. Now, we won't really necessarily get into that, but if you are an inheritor of an IRA, Professor Plum, and I'm going to take a guess that in more cases than not, this is somebody who is about in their peak earning years, somebody who is in their, let's say, 40s
in many cases,
50s.
I mean, you've got a parent who may be 70 or 80, and the kids are in their 50s.
And they pass away, and then the kids inherit this IRA. And it's nice to get money, but at the same time, don't you want to make it sort of tax efficient? So how does it work?
Possible. And we're also looking at one of the largest transfers of wealth from the baby boom generation down to the next generations. Trillions of dollars coming from one generation to another over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And a decent chunk of that is in tax-deferred accounts.
Oh, yeah, it's already happening. I mean, it's already started, and it will continue for the next 10 years,
so
20 years.
It's likely that you might be the recipient of some amount of money that came from a retirement account or an IRA.
Now, while that money is nice to get, anytime you get money, it's nice to get. For some people who may not even need it, for some people it could create a real tax headache because once they inherit that IRA, Professor Plum, the rules as they are now force them to take a required minimum distribution no matter what age they are.
In many cases, but it's confusing. But yes, there's different categories of individuals, and those categories of individuals dictate when you have to take your distribution. The surviving spouse has the most option, the most flexibility. I mean, the rules for a surviving spouse basically did not change. So what a surviving spouse could do with an IRA that they inherited, years ago is the same as what they can do now. They didn't change the rules for surviving spouses. They also didn't change the rule for somebody who's within 10 years of the age, at least, either older or within 10 years of the age of the person that died.
Yeah, they had
so if you're leaving it to a brother, a sister, or somebody similar in age to yourself, that person has the same rules that they always had from before.
But generally what you're seeing, I think, is one generation to the next. There's, 20 some odd years separating the two.
Yeah, the key is 10. If it's more than 10 years difference in age, and they're a non-spouse, they have this new 10-year rule.
So how does this work? And let's get to the strategy part too.
Well, the idea is that, assuming that the individual who was the original owner of the IRA died in year 2020 or later, we have these new rules for the beneficiary, who is a designated beneficiary, who is not in a special category. Special categories being the age 10 years younger or less, surviving spouse, chronically ill, a minor child, not a grandchild, but a minor child of the owner. They get the old rules. Everybody else gets a new rule. And the new rule is it's all got to come out within 10 years. Now,
within 10 years of the date of death, you're
within
saying.
10 years of within 10 tax years.
Yeah.
So the person, it's 10 years.
Well,
if they died this year, it's all got to be out by 2033.
Okay, there you go.
So it's just a 10-year rule. Now, when they first came out, the interpretation was, well, that means I don't have to take anything out years 1 through 9, and I can take 100% out in year 10. Even with that interpretation, though, that may not have been the best thing to do, because if you let it grow for 10 years, it gets really big, and then you got to take all of it out in 1 year.
Which and
that
presumably
could really screw up your tax.
Well, and presumably over 10 years, it's grown something.
Hopefully,
I would hope.
I mean, and that can, but just taking it out, if
in
you had
one lump sum,
whether
that's
it's $100,000 or $1 million, taking it out in one lump sum instead of that $100,000 taking it $10,000 a year or something. The rule gives us the ability, though, to take whatever we want out in years 1 through 9. And so it gives us, we know we're going to have to take it out over the 10 years. Which years and in what distribution method, as far as how much, should we be taking it out? I may be 55 right now. I'm going to retire at 60. So maybe I don't want to take much out for the next 5 years, but then the next 5 years I'll be retired and my income will go down. I'll take it all out over that time. Or maybe I'll be working the whole time, so I'll just spread it out evenly over the 10 years.
So if I'm let's say in my 50s and I inherit an IRA, I can still take nothing for 9 years if I want.
Yes and no. I mean, the new interpretation it goes back to, okay, how old was the owner of the IRA when they died?
I'm going to be sorry I asked this because this gets technical.
I'm going to skip the really technical part. Was the owner who died taking required minimum distributions? There's a little bit of fudge room in here, but not much. Don't worry. Were they taking required minimum distributions? If they were taking required minimum distributions, then the beneficiary that's more than 10 years younger has the stretch rules for years 1 through 9, just like the old days. And whatever's left in year 10 has to come out.
Okay. But they do have an RMD.
They do have an RMD.
Now, if the person was not taking required minimum distribution.
0, 1 through 9 required, 100% required year 10.
Okay. All right. So no matter what, when you inherit an IRA, 401k, whatever it is, you've got to. It's all that IRA's got to be gone.
If you're not
within 10 years.
If you're not one of the special categories, yes, you've got the 10-year rule. It's all coming out in 10 years. So now it's just a question of how to treat it, which way. And the unfortunate issue with this is an inherited IRA. The distributions from an inherited IRA cannot be converted to Roth at any of it. So it's
so I couldn't take a required minimum distribution and then
take the rest and go to Roth with it, but no. Inherited IRAs are not allowed to do Roth conversions.
What a good point you made.
Now, when we're talking strategy, depending upon how old the individual is, we're looking at when does this money have to come out? When are you going to retire? Maybe the person's 60 and they're going to retire at 65. We can use the inherited IRA if we have. Take whatever we have to take out to satisfy the required minimum distribution. It's not a big number because it's based on my life expectancy. But then use it as what we call bucket number 1 for the first 5 years, 6, 7 years of retirement. Oh. And while we, first 5 years, however many years I have on the remaining 10, so that I start and I deplete this particular area that has a required minimum before I get to 73 and have my own required minimum distribution on my own account.
You got a double whammy there, right?
Yeah, but it's all about who you are, what you're doing, what your age is. But a lot of times, waiting until, even if you have a 0 RMD year 1 through 9, that may not be the best thing to do. Just because it's not required doesn't mean you shouldn't maybe use your current tax bracket to your advantage. Because if you don't, like that $100,000 IRA, I'm just making numbers up. Mm-hmm. Maybe 10 years from now, it's $200,000. Well, $200,000 is most likely going to put you in a much higher tax bracket than you would otherwise be. But if I take 10, 11, 12,000 a year out of it, that may not put me in a higher tax bracket.
So you may wind up paying overall a whole lot less tax.
Yes.
By taking it out, even if you don't need to. Now, do you see this often? Somebody in their 50s. This is where having an advisor really, if you're in your, if you're in your prime earning years, this is where you really need to check with the services of an advisor like Professor Plum here. Do you also see where somebody is maybe making a decent amount of money? They inherit $500,000 that's in an IRA. They say, money. And they take the entire sum out of the IRA and put it in their bank account without giving it any thought.
When it's $500,000, I don't see that very often.
When do you see? When it's a lot less.
When it's $50,000, yeah, I see that. And if people treat it as, like lottery winning, and it's just time to go to town and go shopping.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me, though, because people who inherit, there are people who are getting IRAs and don't know anything about the taxability of them. They just say, I got an IRA. Look, I'm $500,000 richer. I'm going to start writing checks out of this one every single year. And they get this gigantic tax bill.
That wakes them up usually pretty quick. I mean, yeah, like I said, though, when they're $500,000, most people realize that this is going to hurt in taxes if they do it. It's the $50,000 ones that, really, even $50,000 for a lot of people will push them into a different tax bracket. If they were to split it over 2 years, 3 years, it would be a lot less taxing. Yeah. Especially people that are on Social Security, they find out, wow, I thought I was going to be in the 12% bracket and I owed 22% on this whole thing, because of the taxation of Social Security. I mean, just understanding what your options are, but everything has a cost.
Well, it really does. I mean, there's costs and benefits to doing things, but the costs are tremendous if you don't do it correctly.
But one cost that they did reduce on us, those benevolent Congress people, they're so wonderful to us.
Yeah, right.
We used to have a fairly high 50% penalty for missing a required minimum distribution.
Right, for anybody.
Yeah, if you missed an RMD, whether you're a beneficiary or your own RMD, that was 50% of the shortfall was the penalty. Yeah. It was a penalty tax on your return that you had to owe. they've reduced that to 25%.
Oh, cut it in half. Look at
And
that.
if you correct it on your own,
without them catching
them catching
so
you,
you turn yourself in?
Yeah, you turn yourself in. It's not 25% penalty, it's a 10% penalty.
Wow. And I've heard, too, that in some cases, if you're real nice and you write a letter, maybe
Right.
they'll let
If you
it go.
miss an RMD and they catch you, and you can say, this is why it happened, here's what we did. As soon as we found out about it, or the problem, we rectified the problem.
Yeah.
The financial institution didn't act on this. Or, you can basically throw yourself on the mercy of the IRS tax court. And a lot of times it works. Sometimes
Not
it
always.
doesn't.
That's not a guarantee. So for somebody,
the guarantee is to do it right.
well, for somebody who's an owner of an IRA, there's one set of strategies. But as I'm thinking about this and I'm looking at it, Professor Plum, people who are inheriting IRAs, as we talked about these baby boom generation who is, passing these assets down to their kids who are now in probably their peak earning years. To me, it seems like somebody who is that age hasn't even. They have more urgency to get this done and to get it done right, because it's one thing to inherit something when you're in a lower tax bracket, but when you're in a higher tax bracket and you don't know what's going on, it can kill you for taxes.
What we've seen for people in the higher tax brackets are they maybe they're not maxing out their 401ks, and so they take the IRA distribution from their RMD and they live on that, and they take more of their paycheck and defer it into the 401k.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're a business owner and they take the RMD and live on it, and they put in a different kind of retirement plan, maybe a cash balance plan or one of these other higher contribution limit retirement plans, where they could put in $100,000 or something into a retirement plan to cut their current taxes, but they're living off the RMD. So they basically are using the taxable event on one side and getting a tax deduction on the other to try to mitigate the issue overall.
Well, they're going to do that if they have somebody like you advising them. I can't see them coming up with that strategy on their own. No offense to you folks listening who might do that.
But those are the fun things. We talk about the puzzle and making the picture the way we want it to be.
That's an interesting thing. You mentioned business owners. We're not going to get into it now, but I would love to do a podcast soon about strategies for business owners, things that they can do. The one you just mentioned,
they can do a lot of things that employees. You may be making a lot of money, but as an employee, you only have so many options. As a business owner, you may have a lot more options.
Hey, this is America, man. They love business owners, and they
do and they don't.
Well, true, but you have more options. While you might have more liabilities in some instances, that's true. But you've got more options available to you, and when you have more options available to you, I believe you have a chance to come out ahead more often than somebody who doesn't.
It gives you options.
Options are good. You want options.
Flexibility and options. That's a wonderful way to work in your planning.
And options, for those listening, mean choices. I'm not talking about stock options.
No.
This is not what I'm talking about. All right, so don't put that in the disclosure. We're out of time. Professor Plum, this is really good stuff. We avoided, I think, getting into the really technical parts of this because
it can get more technical.
Well, it can, and there are exceptions to some of the stuff that we said, but generally speaking,
yes.
And this is where a financial advisor is really crucial. You may be working with one if you're an IRA owner and you're in your 70s, and that's great. That's really good. But if you're a potential inheritor of an IRA, my advice to you I would strongly urge you to talk to Professor Rick Plum or any of the advisors at Lucia Capital Group. 800-644-1150 is their number, 800-644-1150. Even if you're not going to inherit an IRA right away or you're not going to inherit one at all, it's time to think about your own required minimum distribution situation well before you turn age 73.
And if you might want to consider how your kids, when they do inherit it, bring them into the picture and help them understand what's going to happen when they inherit it. And maybe they can then use the money more efficiently than they would otherwise think about using.
Even better point. We've been trying to stress this to people here. Get your kids involved. We talked about this with regard to estate planning, and part of your estate
planning.
Part of your estate is going to include these qualified accounts. Your IRAs, your 401ks, all that kind of stuff, and your personal money, your home, all of that. As it starts to be transferred, you really need to bring your beneficiaries in, usually your kids, and have them talk and get to know what's going on. 800-644-1150, that's the number, or go to luciacap.com. You can find all this information and more at their website, luciacap.com, LUCIACAP.com. This particular podcast has hit episode number 155, for those of you keeping track.
Wow.
I know it, years and years. And if you want to listen to more of this stuff, great advice, you should go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We're on both of those. You can hear this, you can download it and listen every single week to a different topic. It's always interesting stuff. I'm telling you, these are important things that you need to know. I hope if you go back and listen to this episode again, you're going to see this is brilliant advice, Professor Plum.
Well, and unfortunately, there is no one size fits all. And so how you treat your RMDs, how you would treat inherited IRAs is all specific to your circumstances.
Right. So if you're going to read something online that says you should always do this, run away, okay? Because your situation is a lot different. Thank you, Professor Plum.
You're
Once
welcome.
again, I do appreciate you being here. Professor Plum is a certified financial planner professional, CFP, and the Chief Financial Planning Officer for Lucia Capital Group for these many years. For him and for the rest of the gang at Lucia Capital Group and with the podcast, I'm your host, Johnny Dean. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. Different types of investments and/or investment strategies involve varying levels of risk, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment strategy will be profitable for a client's or prospective client's portfolio. Thus, investments may result in a loss of principal. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. This material is gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution or RMD in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. Roth IRA distributions of principal from a Roth IRA are tax-free. However, any earnings will be taxed at ordinary income rates, and a 10% penalty tax will apply if withdrawn prior to age 59.5 or within 5 years of the date the Roth IRA was established, whichever is longer. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. The information provided is based on current laws, which are subject to change at any time. Lucia Capital Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. Rick Plum is a registered representative with and security and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Lucia Capital Group, a separate entity from LPL Financial.